This Raw Green episode is brought to you by OBI, a sustainability consultancy firm specialized in life cycle assessment and decarbonization strategies. For more information, check oneob.com or visit our page on social media. Links in the description. I am Francesco De Lieto. I am passionate about sustainability and green technologies. Welcome to a new episode of Raw Green. Think for a second about the wonderful historical moment we are currently living in, with so many new innovations emerging all at the same time: EVs, drones, hydrogen, battery science, a multitude of different sources of renewable energy, space travel, robotaxis, and more. While all of these developments are extremely fascinating and at different stages of development and adoption, municipalities and states around the world are now trying to determine the best solutions for their public transportation needs, both current and future. It is not an easy task to choose where to concentrate resources when you have them. Until a few years ago, you could have just opted for a good old diesel option. But now municipalities and states must factor in environmental metrics in their decisions. Is it EVs? Is it hydrogen? What about methanol for marine transportation? To help clear some doubts on what the future of public transportation could be, today we have two very smart gentlemen from Iraq Research, a phenomenal research center in Italy, Wolfram Sparber and Gianluca Grazieschi. Gentlemen, welcome to Raw Green. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you. Fine. Happy to
Uh,
be
w-
here.
Welcome, Wolfram and Gianluca. Very happy to have you here on board for this episode. What I wanted to ask you it is, I came across a while ago a LCA, a life cycle assessment study that you guys did, which was a fantastic study for n number of reasons. First of all, it was based on primary data, so you had access to primary data. That means that also the quality of the outcome that came out from the study it is really good, and it was a comparison in the province of Bolzano, comparing the use of hydrogen, electric, and internal combustion public transportation buses. Okay, can we start from there? Can you please give us an overview of what the study was and what were the results of this study?
Maybe I start with a short introduction, then Gianluca, I hand you over more for details and methodology. So, as you mentioned, in Bolzano, northern Italy, we are in the fortunate situation that we have different kind of buses on the road since several years now, and we had the opportunity to do a detailed monitoring of these buses. And that means that we could observe real world data and real world consumption of electric buses, of hydrogen buses, of diesel buses circulating in the same town and in the same surroundings. And therefore, we have the possibility to do nearly a direct comparison between these technologies. That is something which is quite unusual because usually municipalities or bus owners decide to go into either one or the other direction. So a direct comparison usually is not possible. A part of the monitoring of this data, we want to go further and do an NCA. And with this, maybe Gianluca, I hand over to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Wolfram. Yes, using this kind of monitored data, we implemented life cycle assessment of basically two main typologies of buses. One were battery electric buses, and the other ones were fuel cell electric buses. And then we compared the life cycle performances of these new zero emission models with the traditional diesel baseline. And yeah, the LCA was implemented using a cradle to grave approach and
Oh wow. Okay.
attributional approach. Yes. And yeah, we used also EcoInvent because we think that this is one of the most reliable database to implement the life cycle assessment of transportation vehicles, but also at the building level. Yeah, the functional unit chosen was 1 vehicle kilometer, but we could have also considered the normalization for the number of passengers, which was not possible because we didn't have data in relation to the occupancy of the buses at the early level. And yeah, the LCA was based on the most recent standards and rules for the implementation of LCA to public transportation vehicles. So basically, the hypotheses done were about the lifespan of this kind of buses. We supposed 12 years, and then we supposed a mileage in the life cycle of 65,000 kilometers. That is a strong hypothesis influencing the results of the analysis. The indicators considered were the global warming potential and the cumulative energy demand to characterize the primary energy consumptions of the buses in terms of renewable primary energy and non-renewable primary energy. And going to the results, we can say that the battery electric buses were the only technology able to be competitive in comparison with the traditional technology, so the diesel bus. Looking at only the operational energy consumptions of the buses, so the ones monitored, we saw that the battery electric buses were characterized by more or less one-third consumptions in comparison with the diesel. And looking at the fuel cell models, the consumptions were about two-thirds in comparison with
So,
the baseline.
So Gianluca, here I stop you for a minute. I think this is a strong result. Actually, it is somehow known in literature. Nevertheless, it is interesting to see from real life data that we have a big efficiency increase from the vehicle if we go away from internal combustion engines, and that in both cases, in the hydrogen case and in the electric vehicle case, but in the electric vehicle case, even much higher than in the hydrogen case. So basically, whatever new technologies we're going to choose, the technology by itself is a relevant step in the efficiency. Yeah, Gianluca,
Together
back
with
to
the
you.
back end.
Yeah, we are talking
Yeah.
about tank to wheel energy consumptions, of course. And the results are strongly linked to the fact that the efficiency of the electric engine in urban pathways is higher in comparison
Yeah.
with the diesel model. And
Yeah.
moreover, these kind of vehicles are able to recover energy from braking. So yeah, the consumptions are much lower for this reason.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that
going
helps.
to the
Sorry, Gianluca.
of course.
That thing applies not just to public transportation, but think about logistics. The same way a
Yes,
last
of course.
mile
Last mile
delivery truck.
logistics is another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is something where you can do the conversion. You will have perhaps some limitation in terms of the weight of the truck itself, that maybe some roads will become inaccessible due to the obviously much heavier truck because of the battery pack. But conversely, on long haul, on long trips, that will become much harder because of the range, because of the charging infrastructure, and because of the charging time as well. So it is nice to see that what happens across different categories of transportation. So you have private transportation, you have the public transportation, and then you have logistic. The variety, the kind of energy and the kind of vehicle remains the same. The characteristics and usage, sorry, remains exactly the same. I find it fascinating, and across the three technologies as well.
No, and in fact, if I may jump in, we just did another study for the Italian E-Mobility Association about the zero-emission vehicles development in Italy over the last years. And what comes out is really that the urban area is one where zero-emission vehicles are taking up very strongly. So the share of zero-emission vehicles which have been ordered by municipalities or their respective public transport companies last year were nearly 70% were zero-emission vehicles. And out of this, over 90% were electric, direct electric buses.
I have a question for you, and Gianluca, maybe you can help me with the LCA data in the maintenance part of electric bus. And again, the same thing applies, for example, on private transportation or logistic. It is always been said that EVs, for example, they require less maintenance because you have a fraction of the moving parts because of a number of other reasons. However, though, I'm curious to know from an environmental perspective, and this I know it, that is it less polluting the maintenance of new vehicles? And I'm telling you this with specific regard for one component: tires. You consume much more tires, and according to some figures that I saw a while ago, you should consume between 20 to 30 or even 40% more tires, because those vehicles, if you think about it, they weigh much more. So, and I find out this in the context of let's say, the tire industry, which is a very competitive market. You don't have that many players, which they play on razor thin margins. And for them, for tire producing company, Michelin, Goodyear's, whatever, the let's say the vehicle revolution for there is a boon is fantastic, because it will increase the consumption of their products. So I was wondering if you came across something like that, or if you ever, let's say, put inside this in one of your studies.
Yeah, actually not. I perfectly agree with you. The consumptions of tires is higher for battery electric vehicles, but we did not consider this aspect in our LCA study. But from the maintenance point of view, I can say that the most important impacts are linked to the necessity of battery substitution within the life cycle of the
Okay, true,
bus.
true. Yeah,
So
makes
that's
sense.
the most important and tricky part of the maintenance of this kind of vehicles.
Which
But
for the
yeah, of
example,
course, we considered this aspect in our study.
which that's great, but for example, for the buses example, when do you have to change the battery pack? I remember for a Tesla you can change a battery pack after 80,000 miles, or close to 60, 80,000 miles. Would the same applies for buses?
Yeah, that has to be seen. So I'm really curious about that. So what we saw within the other study on the Italian national tenders that the company choose, several of them decided to foresee one change of battery pack. So if the lifespan of a bus is considered within 12 years, they consider to once and halfway, so 6 to 7 to 8 years to change the battery pack. Obviously, yeah, here we have to see, and we have to see how the technology goes. As you might know, yeah, one heavy duty lorry provider is now at the end of the year putting a 40-ton machine on the road, so ready to sell. You can already order them, and they're using what is used by many buses, LFP batteries, and they say, no, we go for 1 million kilometers, and with our battery pack, you should
Wow.
go through the whole lifetime of the the lorry. So unfortunately, we did not have in now. So we have monitoring data about the consumption of the buses. We do not have monitoring data about the detailed maintenance cost. But I think that is important and interesting to see over the next couple of years, actually in fleets, how the impact is going to be.
Yeah, that you have those ground data to be able to get more results out of it. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to talk with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump on this because, okay, we study, you guys study what the utilization into public transportation need, and this requires a fairly complicated organization before, during, and after the utilization of electric propulsion or hydrogen powered buses. And I'm talking about bottlenecks. Okay. So I see two major categories of bottlenecks. The first one, it is costs. Okay. So the cost of buying this, which I'm not going to talk it for a second. What I want to talk to you is the second bottleneck, which is infrastructure. Okay. And when I say infrastructure, the sub bottlenecks, what I see are the fueling stations, so the charging points, the production of these buses, which, as far as I know, right now it is centralized in one region of the world, which we'll talk about that. The transportation of, for example, hydrogen, which is a very complex thing to do, and the assistance. You need the manpower to be able to run the assistance. You need specialized manpower. We're not talking about for both EVs and the hydrogen part. So I wanted to pick your brain onto this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, maybe I can take this and share a couple of let's say informations and feedbacks which I got on that topic. On the one hand, what was said by our local bus company is that the fact to change from diesel to hydrogen is easier from a pure organization point of view than from a diesel to electric, in the sense that if you change from diesel to hydrogen, you have a similar rhythm which you had already with diesel. So the driver is driving around and then delivering the bus at the depot. Somebody else is picking it up, is refueling it, is cleaning it, parking it, and then you take it back. And that is happening with diesel, and that is happening with hydrogen. Obviously, with electric, it's different because you don't have one centralized charging station, but you have many charging stations. So you park your car at your depot and you plug it there. So that means that you basically have to change your depot because you have to electrify your depot. And then the question is it enough to electrify the depot, or do you need additional charging stations for backup at the end of the line, for example, or whatever? So that has to be seen.
Yeah.
But exactly. So what several operators say is basically you don't have to think about a vehicle, but you have to change an overall system. It's a mobility system that is changing, and therefore the decision which kind of system you are taking is important. And with regard to maintenance, obviously that is a big discussion. So how much do you outsource and how much do you keep in-house? And buying new technology, or you have the power and the possibility to train all your internal staff from traditional buses to the new technologies, or otherwise you have to somehow, how one operator said, you have to marry the one who is delivering you the buses for a long-term contract agreement for maintenance and operation. And that obviously has to go over years, because if you keep these buses for 8, 10, or 12 years, you need the assistance for all the time. And the older the buses get, the more assistance you need. So it's important that you actually have a long-term contract with the company, and that this is part of the overall evaluation. And in general, I would say what is very important in both cases is to see the total cost of ownership of this whole thing. Because obviously you need to look at the infrastructure, you need to look at the buses, but then usually you spend less money by charging. At least in the battery electric case, it's very clear that it's cheaper to run them than it's with diesel. So you save over time. You might save about maintenance, what we said before. But all these things have to be considered. Do I have to change my battery pack? How much does that cost? So you nearly need to do a full calculation and evaluate, yeah, where which is the most efficient one for in your specific case.
Yes,
Okay.
basically the
Yeah.
adoption of a life cycle approach is fundamental in these kind of comparisons between different technologies. And
Okay.
yeah, looking at our results, we can say the battery electric buses were the only technology able to be competitive under the current emission factors and energy mixes
That is a very good
which are
point
in
because we're
place in
talking
Italy.
about the
Yeah,
Italian grid, which is not the cleanest in Europe. So those
yeah,
results,
exactly.
if put in the context of a greener grid, are even better. Imagine like North
For
European
sure, for
countries
sure.
like Sweden, Norway, or France, that they have lower, very low gram of CO2 equivalent emissions per kilowatt hour. So yes, that is a
Yeah, for
very good
sure.
point,
But also
Gianluca.
considering the decarbonization efforts which are in place in different European countries, could have provided even better results
Yeah,
in our LCA
yeah. So
study.
the
Yeah.
curve,
So basically,
it is improving together with the decarbonization of the grid. The results are improving
Yeah,
together with the
sure.
decarbonization of the grid.
absolutely, and I mean what comes here through is just the very high efficiency of the battery electric vehicle, and the fact that while in the one case, in the electric case, you can use green electricity directly, in the hydrogen case, you still need to, if you start from green electricity, to transform green electricity in hydrogen and then transform it back, and these are both processes with low efficiency, leading to a much higher cumulative energy demand. So, with regard to comparison to diesel buses, if you go on direct electric, basically we reduce by 50%. While
Wow.
if we take the electric line to hydrogen, we nearly double the cumulative energy demand. So there's quite a big difference. And in the
Yeah.
green warming potential, it really depends. In the battery electric case, it's always an advantage independently if you take the actual Italian electricity mix or green renewable energy. While in the hydrogen case, that makes a big difference. In the renewable case, if it's purely renewable, it works out, obviously. But if we take the Italian electricity mix, then hydrogen is not advantageous.
Okay. And
See,
were
another
you guys?
limitation of our
Yeah.
study was
Go go go
linked to
go.
the fact that we considered only two impact categories. So basically, one,
Mm,
the global warming, and one, resource use indicator. But
mm.
looking at other impacts, such as the impacts, for example, on human health linked to air quality in cities, for sure, the implementation of zero emission vehicles inside cities could provide
You know,
beneficial results.
there is something that not many people do, and I would love to see more about it, which are the what would be if you were not going to adopt. What would be the consequence, or what are going to be the consequences if you are not going to transition towards EVs or hydrogen? What would be the consequences if you're still so in the narrative there is very little of, let's say, reverse engineer that, and saying, okay, what are going to be the results if we are not going to decarbonize the grid? What would be the results if we're not going to move towards EVs? Okay, I've been to, I was telling you in pre-recording, last month I've been around like a spin top around conferences and events. And well, with one was organized by a bank, and they were giving us this beautiful charts, very well prepared, beautiful colors. But that at the same time, with all the outlooks and the various scenarios, but none of these charts was saying, if we don't move towards a more sustainable approach on X, Y, and Z, this is what's going to happen at the GDP level, at the country level, at region levels, and whatnot. So that narrative, I'd love to hear more about it. I don't know if across your studies you have something like that.
Well, maybe I would like to give two comments. The first one is you might have come across the publication in Nature, which has been published in April, a work from Potsdam Institute for Climate Change about the cost of climate change. And they are estimating already now the cost of climate change in 2050 in around 38 trillion US dollars. So very, very high and actually much higher than the cost of action. And that is only based on the past emissions of CO2. So independently from what we are going to do from now onwards. That is one thing. Another thing is coming back to what you said at the beginning, the imagining not doing. I would say let's imagine we go forward and we go forward fast on the pathway we're discussing, especially on urban scale. And that means that we bring to zero emission the whole transport in cities, so buses, lorries, vehicles, motorbikes, and so on. We throw out our gas heating systems or oil boilers and substitute them with heat pumps or with district heating system. And we go towards an industry which goes towards electrification or utilization of hydrogen and in part, let's say, biomethane. Then we come to a city where the noise is going drastically down and the air quality is going drastically up. So that is another point of urban buses or of buses, because they are going around all the day in cities, so very close to where we actually breathe. And therefore, I think, especially for buses, a fast transition is really an important point, because they are doing millions of kilometers in the cities where we are and where we breathe. And there, both technologies, hydrogen and electric vehicles, can help, because both do not produce emissions on site.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Let me ask you something. Okay, let's stick to that concept that we are going to move forward, okay, and increase adoption. You guys don't work just at Italian level, you work at European level. So I was curious to know from you, what do you see around Europe, for example? It is the country that has a different gear in adopting public sustainable transportation compared to others. Where do you see there is a lot of mojo going on?
Well, I must say, in over the last years, especially the Scandinavian countries were very active. So, with regard to electric mobility, by far the world master always cited is Norway. Norway had a very simple, but as well very clear and straightforward policy since more than 10 years, and a clear target of getting 100% zero emission vehicles in the new sales by 2025. They are now over 80%, maybe already 90%. So they will reach this target without bigger problems. And that is interesting to see the Norway case, because it shows that if the policy is right, if the conditions are right, then you can really change within 10 years. You can turn around the sales figures of your
like with renewables,
of your vehicles.
Like with renewables,
yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
Like with renewable energies. Yes.
You can be very fast, and with regard, if we look at the heating system, we see similar figures. So if you look at the new sales, basically in Scandinavia, you have only heat pumps left. There's nothing else. Well, in Italy, even in 22, we still sold 1 million gas boilers. You don't buy a gas boiler, or there's no sales of gas boilers anymore in Sweden, Norway, or Denmark.
Okay. And do you think that last month election are going to slow down the adoption process? I mean, the Greens lost a little bit of seats. There is a growing, for different reasons, but there is a growing anti-ESG movement in Europe, and I was thinking about, for example, the difference between anti-ESG in the US versus the anti-ESG in Europe. If you think about it, in the US, it is mostly focused on the profit of any venture. They say you cannot not invest in non-ESG products because if it is good business, you should invest it. Think about pension funds, think about public funds, whatever, in 3 hours. While on the other side of the pond, in Europe, the anti-ESG, it is because of this, let's be frank, let's be honest, a very heavy regulation waves of compliance, reporting, certifications, and whatnot, that obviously are big costs for companies. So, what do you think it is going to happen in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, considering the new EU Parliament?
So my feeling is, but take this as a very personal feeling. My feeling is that um, what you say is correct, and in my opinion, maybe Europe has been focusing too much on rules and on red tape and on regulations, and too little on business opportunities.
I agree with you
The
100%.
energy transition and the mobility transition is a huge business opportunity if we can get it right. But obviously, as you were saying before, if in UK you need 3 to 8 years to connect a renewable energy plant, then to make a business case is super difficult. If
Mhm.
the laws where you can make a renewable energy plant are changing every year, how do you make a business plan? How do you start rolling
Can't.
out projects?
You
So,
can't.
so I think we really have to strongly work on putting these two things together. So making companies aware, making the society aware. Look, this transition is good for our environment, but it's as well good for our geopolitical independence. It's good for our portfolio. It is good for the taxes we pay here instead of sending them around the world because we pay less fossil fuels, which we don't have in Europe,
Yeah.
and therefore we are better up if we do this transition fast.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. There is a number of things. I mean, so many upsides in pushing forward to develop the industry locally. Okay, whether it is obviously for environmental reasons, but in terms of job opportunities, in terms of manpower, in terms of tax income for governments around, they need that because they are going to lose all the monies that they get from fossil fuels, all those taxes on fossil fuels that runs I don't know what proportion of the governments of countries, sorry, around the world, banks accounts. I don't know what is their proportion. I don't have those data, obviously, but they need to do that. They need to push on that development, and they need to support companies and research Let me say it one more time, locally, because in
But
other
as
sides
well,
of the world.
I think the green transition has, at least in my opinion, this nice thing that it is potentially of benefit for very different actors. So from research to industry to material industry to basic industry to electronic industry, but as well to installers on site to so to workforces on very different levels in the society and in the population. And obviously, a lot of work have to be done locally. So you have, if you want to refurbish a house, you have to refurbish the house where the house is. If you want to set up an infrastructure for electric mobility, you have to set up your charging station where the house is. So you need local workforce. You cannot displace that to
No.
Africa, China, or wherever.
Yeah.
From that point of view, it makes a lot of sense to use our resources and try to circulate our money in our own countries.
Yes.
On the
That
other
is a very
hand,
good
from my
point.
point of view, it is necessary to address these challenges, particularly the climate change one, at the international level. It's not
Sure.
possible to have different gears in different countries, also inside Europe. I
Yeah.
mean, the decarbonization efforts are different in different countries, and it is not possible. We have to move together toward the same goal.
Yes. That is very true. The common goal, it is It is by far the biggest targets and aim that any government around the world should aim for, because there has been several discussions on cross-border pollutions, right? Who's responsible for what? When you run the LCA, for example, right, it is also interesting to see which portion of those emissions are staying, where are they coming from which country are coming from. Okay, and we know this, that 9 times out of 10 they all comes from the supply chain, which are not where the product is going to be utilized, right? So
Mhm.
there is also an important part that needs to be evaluated
Yeah, but
for this
looking at the
episode. Yeah,
geopolitical, sorry.
go on.
No, only to conclude, looking at the geopolitical level, for example, the BRICS countries are claiming their emissions, of course, to reach the wealth achieved by developed countries. So that's a huge problem at the worldwide level, particularly
Look,
if addressing the climate change.
yes, and there is a curve which is called the environmental Kuznets curve that says that countries or people, that you can apply the same concept to people too, they start to be more aware of environmental issues in parallel with their wealth creation. So the more they become wealthy, the more they focus their attention towards the environment and sustainability, which makes sense in many countries. And it is hard to go to a developing country and ask them, hey, you got to stop developing right now because you have to think about the environment. It is hard to tell them, but
Yeah.
when you show them the data, what we were saying before, Wolfram, if you show them the data, if you're not going to do this now, this is what is going to happen. Okay, so this
On the other hand, obviously they have we have a difficulty of transformation. For them, it's a matter where they invest to, and maybe they can just simply skip certain technologies that we have been using for decades, which are super inefficient. And I hope that the technology development is fast enough that for them, green electricity is simply faster and cheaper to install than to install
yeah,
a coal power plant, a gas power plant, or a nuclear power plant.
yes, yes, that's a very good point. Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. This was a very lively and thoughtful conversation. I appreciate your time. I look forward doing with you another episode and to read another of your research. So, for guys that don't know Wolfram and Gianluca, they pop out researches like their magazines, okay? But we're not talking about simple researches. We're talking about studies way complex and complicated. So, thank you for your time, for your valuable time. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for the invitation, and let's go forward.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Francesco. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Raw Green, brought to you by Obi, a sustainability consultancy firm specialized in life cycle assessment and decarbonization strategies. If you're looking to make an impact, a tangible and measurable one, reach out to us on our website at oneob.com or visit our social media. Links below in the description. See you at the next episode. Ciao.